How many times can a single man survive a coup? In Burkina Faso, the answer keeps rising. Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power in September 2022, it feels like every few months someone new tries to drag him down. First, it was whispers of discontent within the military. Then came talk of foreign interference. Now it's confirmed. 113 people, yes, 113, have been arrested in connection with a fresh coup attempt against him. It's no longer just a rumor, it's war. Traoré didn't rise through careful diplomacy or elections. He emerged from chaos, seizing power with a promise to end corruption, expel foreign domination, and fight back against insurgents tearing the country apart. But instead of the calm after the storm, he has found himself on a permanent battlefield. Not just against insurgents in the bush, but against suits in boardrooms, generals in barracks, and influencers on the airwaves. His every move has been watched, doubted, and challenged. And yet, each time someone tries to knock him off the podium, he stands taller. The latest plot isn't just another footnote in Burkina Faso's long history of coups. It was a serious operation. Former military leaders, sacked officials, media agents, and alleged links to violent insurgents. This was not chaos. This was choreography. Their goal was clear: destabilize the nation, embarrass Traoré, and paint him as a failed guardian of security. But once again, he struck first. What exactly was this latest plan? Who was involved, and why did they think this time would be different? And most importantly, what does Traoré's response reveal about the kind of leader he is becoming? Let's find out. By the time the public heard the news, the plot had already been dismantled. But behind the headlines and cold arrest numbers lies a deeper story, one that stretches across military bases, shadowy boardrooms, and television studios. This wasn't an angry group of dissidents shouting from rooftops. It was a carefully arranged operation involving people who once held power, knew how the system worked, and were confident they could break it again. At the center of it all was a tangled alliance of former regime figures, dismissed officers, and civilian collaborators, many of whom had quietly been building networks ever since Traoré's rise disrupted the old order. Among those apprehended was Paul-Henri Damiba, the man who ironically had overthrown another government just months before being deposed himself by Traoré. Damiba, though publicly silent since his fall from grace, reportedly maintained loyal ties within the officer corps and certain security factions. His reappearance in this plot sends a clear signal. Elements of the past regime never truly surrendered. They were biding their time. What makes this plot stand out is its sophistication. Intelligence officers uncovered maps detailing strategic urban locations, including administrative buildings, military barracks, and symbolic public spaces. These were not random attack points. The targets were chosen to create maximum psychological disruption, to simulate collapse. Documents reportedly outlined phases of the operation. First, coordinated attacks meant to trigger fear. Second, rapid dissemination of manipulated news across media platforms. And third, a staged declaration of new leadership under a restorative transitional banner. It wasn't a coup by force alone. It was meant to be a digital and psychological takeover as well. What investigators found wasn't just evidence of planning, but signs of real coordination between factions that normally wouldn't trust each other. Some of the suspects came from military backgrounds, others from the media landscape. There were even civilian contractors linked to the logistics and transport sectors. This wasn't a chaotic uprising. It was a corporate merger of power-hungry opportunists. Traoré's reforms had cut them out of contracts, stripped their military ranks, and redirected public funds away from their hands. Now, they wanted back in. One chilling aspect of the plan was the use of misinformation as a weapon. According to the intelligence briefings, part of the strategy included manipulating social media narratives in real time during the attacks. The idea was to overwhelm public channels with content showing panic, failure, and confusion. Videos of fleeing civilians, fake reports of army defections, and voice notes suggesting that key towns had fallen to insurgents. The aim was not just to strike the government, but to paralyze the nation's confidence in its survival. That kind of psychological operation can sometimes do more damage than bullets. especially in a country already traumatized by a decade of violence and abandonment. Even more disturbing were signs that parts of the plot overlapped with Burkina Faso's persistent insurgent crisis. While no direct ties between the coup planners and insurgent leaders have been officially confirmed, some of the arrested individuals reportedly had unexplained connections to areas heavily infiltrated by armed groups. This raises unsettling questions. Were the plotters counting on the chaos of insurgent attacks to provide cover for their moves? Or worse, was there silent coordination? If so, it would mean that factions once responsible for national security were willing to align with the very forces they once claimed to fight, just to remove the man now in charge. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Yet despite the plan's detail and the pedigree of those involved, it failed. Spectacularly. And that failure points to something important. The state under Traoré may still be fragile, but it is no longer asleep. Intelligence services were not only able to detect the plot, but to move ahead of it. The arrest came before the first strike, before the first message could be seeded online. That kind of preemptive efficiency is rare in Burkina Faso's modern political history. It suggests that, beneath the surface, Traoré is quietly building a surveillance and counterintelligence network that his predecessors never dared to construct, or deliberately avoided because it would have upset their friends in power. What we're seeing is a government that, for all its revolutionary rhetoric, understands the rules of realpolitik. Traoré isn't playing idealist games. He's watching his enemies closely, listening to their whispers, and tightening the bolts around institutions once loose with corruption and complicity. That doesn't make him a savior, but it does make him dangerous to those who once moved in and out of the palace without resistance. The most important takeaway from this plot is not that it happened, but that it almost worked, and still failed. These weren't amateurs. These were people who once had the country in their hands. That they miscalculated so badly speaks volumes about how much Burkina Faso's power dynamics have shifted in just 2 years. Traoré is not just sitting in the presidential seat, he's reinforcing it with steel, censors, and suspicion. Still, one must ask, if a plot this advanced could be neutralized so efficiently, what exactly is driving so many people to try again and again? What is it about this particular leader that has turned old allies into sworn enemies and made Burkina Faso one of the most unstable, yet most defiant nations in West Africa? To answer that, we must look beyond arrests and operations and explore the deeper forces, political, personal, and foreign, that keep pushing against Ibrahim Traoré. It's one thing to survive a coup. It's another thing to be the kind of leader who invites them like clockwork. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, surviving plots have become a job requirement. But the real question that haunts every arrest, every foiled plan, and every intercepted voice memo is this: why are there always more? The answer isn't as simple as power envy or political rivalry. It's more dangerous than that. Because what Traoré represents is not just a change of leadership, but a direct threat to a tightly woven ecosystem of influence that is never expected to be interrupted. Traoré has made enemies not just by what he's done, but by what he refuses to do. And that, more than any speech or press conference, is why they want him gone. From the moment he took power, Traoré made it clear he wasn't going to be another seat warmer for international donors, or a ceremonial general mouthing empty slogans. He didn't follow the usual script of extending olive branches to the old elite. He didn't offer diplomatic immunity to ex-leaders or recycling positions to dismissed officers. He brought in a younger, more ideologically driven military circle and sidelined career politicians. That alone broke a decades-old political rhythm, where even a coup leader was expected to maintain the status quo after taking over. Instead, Traoré began tearing up the rulebook, and that's when the alarms started going off in all the wrong places. One of the most profound shifts came not through declarations but through refusals. Traoré refused to engage in the typical donor-state dependency dance that had paralyzed Burkina Faso's policy choices for decades. Unlike his predecessors, who relied heavily on French and American military and financial assistance, Traoré pursued alternatives. He welcomed cooperation with countries seen as geopolitical outsiders by the West: Russia, Iran, and China. He openly entertained the idea of BRICS membership and championed the idea of sovereign development. a concept that sounds harmless, but in practice dismantles the foundation upon which the old elite fed. Burkina Faso, for decades, functioned like a client state. Its budget, its army, and even its media narratives were often shaped by foreign embassies and external consultants. Traoré disrupted that with surgical precision. He slashed ties with institutions that previously held indirect control over Burkina Faso's domestic affairs. International NGOs were scrutinized. Contracts with European multinationals were re-evaluated or canceled. Foreign military presence was reduced or removed altogether. To his supporters, it was a long overdue decolonization. To his enemies, both inside and outside, it was mutiny. This repositioning also exposed just how deeply intertwined the political class had become with foreign interests. There were military officers whose entire careers were built on training missions with European forces. There were politicians whose family businesses relied on donor projects. There were journalists whose media houses had survived solely on foreign grants. By breaking the chain at the top, Traoré had inadvertently starved everyone connected to the system. They didn't just lose influence. They lost their pipeline to power, money, and international protection. That's what makes these coup attempts feel almost inevitable. Traoré is not just removing figures, he is collapsing a pyramid. He's not just unpopular among former power holders, he is intolerable. Because his rise has created a political economy where none of the old tricks work. You can't just call an ambassador, mobilize a few loyalists, and negotiate your way back into government. Traoré has made clear that there will be no restoration. Even more threatening is that he speaks the language of Sankara without turning it into nostalgia. Many leaders in the region reference Sankara's name to earn applause, but go on ruling like colonized governors. Traoré, on the other hand, is trying to implement aspects of that radical independence project, from agricultural self-sufficiency to the creation of state-owned industries. He wants Burkina Faso to feed itself, fuel itself, and defend itself. That vision is intoxicating to the young and the poor, and terrifying to the class that always told them it couldn't be done. There's also the threat of contagion. Traoré's style of leadership is spreading across borders, whether intentionally or not. Mali and Niger have already followed in his footsteps, expelling foreign forces, questioning regional blocs, and reorienting toward alternative alliances. If Burkina Faso continues to stabilize under Traoré, it sets a precedent that others may follow. And that precedent undermines the regional business model of foreign-backed governance and donor-funded dependency. The international community may not say it out loud, but they are watching him with the anxiety usually reserved for unpredictable revolutionaries. Even within the military, Traoré faces challenges. Not all officers appreciate being led by someone they consider junior or unorthodox. His refusal to elevate senior generals to positions of unchecked power has ruffled feathers. Some see his leadership as impulsive, too ideological, or too isolated. Others simply don't like the fact that his power comes from popularity, not seniority. In a military institution where hierarchy is sacrosanct, Traoré's grassroots approach feels alien and threatening. Ultimately, Traoré is under attack because he refuses to be managed. He cannot be bought, softened, or co-opted by the usual tools. Every institution he touches is being rewired, from the army to the treasury to the national identity. The more success he finds, the more violently the system tries to eject him. And as long as he remains immune to the old currency of compromise, the attempts won't stop. Because what's at stake is not just power. It's the end of a political era that never imagined someone like him would come along. Surviving one coup can strengthen a leader's image. Surviving multiple times? That starts to change the structure of power itself. In most countries, leaders emerge from institutions. But in places where institutions are constantly collapsing, power starts emerging from the individual alone. And that's exactly what is beginning to take shape in Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's continued survival against plots, internal sabotage, and quiet foreign pressure has transformed him from a temporary figure into something more permanent, something heavier. With every failed coup, he becomes not just the head of state, but the state itself. And when a single man becomes inseparable from the functioning of a country, the game changes entirely. What began as a military transition is evolving into a new political architecture, one centered entirely around Traoré. This transformation wasn't part of any official plan. It's happening in real time, as a reaction to constant pressure. When Traoré first took power, his government described itself as temporary, focused on stabilizing the country before handing power back to civilians. That timeline now feels obsolete, not because Traoré has turned into a power-hungry dictator, but because the environment he operates in has made a peaceful transition nearly impossible. How do you organize elections when parts of the country are overrun by insurgents? How do you restore democracy when the political class you're supposed to hand power back to is actively trying to remove you? The more Traoré resists being overthrown, the more he is forced to centralize power, not out of desire, but out of necessity. That centralization is visible everywhere. Appointments are now made not on seniority, but on loyalty and ideological alignment. The military hierarchy has been reshuffled to favor younger officers who believe in Traoré's vision. Civilian agencies once tied to donor-backed programs have been absorbed or bypassed. The economy is increasingly being managed through state-controlled initiatives that report directly to the presidency. On the surface, it might look like the standard behavior of a consolidating regime. But there's a deeper shift happening. Traoré is not just centralizing power, he's personalizing it. People now refer to him in ways once reserved for revolutionary figures, as a symbol of hope, resistance, and national rebirth. That kind of symbolism is powerful, but dangerous. Because when a state becomes too dependent on one man's survival, the entire system becomes fragile in new and unpredictable ways. There's another risk too. Over time, survival requires not just resisting enemies, but anticipating them before they act. This leads to a culture of hypervigilance, suspicion, and silence. Even the most sincere allies are treated as potential threats. The political system starts narrowing, not because of paranoia alone, but because the environment rewards only those who are loyal without question. In this kind of structure, creativity shrinks, debate disappears, and dissent becomes indistinguishable from betrayal. The danger is not that Traoré will become the next dictator. The real danger is that Burkina Faso may no longer be able to produce any alternative to him. Because once the system has been reshaped entirely around one person's ability to withstand assault, it stops being a system. It becomes a survival mechanism. And survival mechanisms don't evolve. They defend, they guard, they repeat. And yet, this is not entirely bleak. What's happening in Burkina Faso could also be interpreted as the formation of a new political order, one that is post-coup, post-colonial, and unapologetically African. In some ways, Traoré is attempting to prove that a different kind of state is possible, one that doesn't rely on foreign military aid, Western validation, or recycled elites. His survival might be painful, it might be bruising, but it's also producing something new, an experimental model where sovereignty is non-negotiable and power is not shared with those who once sold it off. This model may not be democratic in the Western sense, but it has its legitimacy. Traoré's government, for all its rough edges, enjoys a degree of support among ordinary citizens that few civilian administrations ever had. That's not just because of his military background, it's because of what he represents, a break from humiliation, dependency, and managed failure. His popularity is born not from perfection, but from contrast. He may not have solved every problem, but he hasn't surrendered either. And in a country that has been told for decades that resistance is futile, that refusal alone is revolutionary, still, revolutions come at a cost. As Traoré's rule becomes more entrenched, the space for transition gets narrower. Burkina Faso is now caught between two fears: the fear of going back and the fear of being stuck. If Traoré stays in power indefinitely, he risks becoming what he once fought against. If he leaves too early, he risks handing power back to those already plotting their next move. It is a trap built not by ambition, but by constant assault. And the longer the attacks continue, the harder it becomes to imagine any future that doesn't revolve entirely around one man's ability to endure. In the end, the question may no longer be whether Traoré can survive the next coup. The question may be whether Burkina Faso can survive without him. Do you think the time has come when everyone who wishes bad for Burkina Faso should be eliminated? Let us know in the comment section. What Traore needs to do to end these external forces forever. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.